So we are gonna start day 2 of the Grow NYC Beginner Gardener Intensive. We'll be here all week with new workshops on gardening, and we're really excited that you could all join us today. My name is Laura Casaragola. I'm a school gardens coordinator here at Grow NYC, and leading our workshop today is Kristen Fields, our school gardens director. And Chantel Kemp, another one of our garden directors, is here as well. So yesterday was day 1, and we did a garden design workshop, which you can find the recording on grownycdistancelearning.org. Kristen, do you want to hit the next slide?
Yes. Oops, there we go.
So this is our schedule for the week. We've got today's seed starting with Kristen. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. we'll be doing a workshop on composting at home with Kate Wimsat. Chantel, who's here with us today, will be leading Thursday's workshop, Natural Pest Management. And then Friday, we've got a garden Q&A with the Teaching Garden. So save all of your general gardening questions and your trickiest garden questions for those special guest appearances on Friday. Make sure you sign up on our Eventbrite for each day so you get the reminder emails and the Zoom link. And if you miss a day or you want to share out the recordings, they'll all be on grownycdistancelearning.org. All right, next slide. Today's presentation will be about 15 or 20 minutes, and we are going to make sure we leave time at the end for questions. If you see down below, there's a Q&A function in the Zoom webinar, so please submit all your questions throughout the workshop into that into the Zoom Q&A. That'll make it easier for us to get to them later on. If we don't get to your question today live, we are going to follow up and answer every single question and post that in the follow-up email. And trust us, we did this yesterday. We made sure we answered every single question. Throughout the workshop, your mics will be muted, but you can still message me through the chat. But again, those questions, make sure you throw them in the Q&A. Without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to Kristen.
Hi, everybody. So today we are going to talk about, oops, let's just switch this out for you. Give me 1 second. Got to get you a different presentation. We are going to be talking about seed starting indoors, and there are so many reasons why we would want to start seeds indoors. I will have that presentation up for you in just a second, but one of the reasons that we want to start seeds indoors is because we can extend our growing season. It allows us to start plants inside and give them a little extra jump on the growing season. You know, we can take days to weeks off of the amount of time that it would take to let some of our hardier plants set up shop. And, you know, like if we're growing tomatoes or, you know, maybe we're growing eggplants, those are all plants that tend to need a little bit more time. Another reason that we might want to start plants indoors is because it's cost effective. Like you can buy a pack of seeds potentially for like $4 or so, and you could get several plants out of those versus buying a single plant for about $4 and then only getting 1 plant. And then let me just get this right up for you. Beautiful. Can everybody see this now? Yes. Okay, great. Another reason we want to start indoors is because it's educational. We get to see the entire process of a seed to, if you're growing something edible, the final product on your plate. And another really important reason to start things indoors is that if you are going to your local big box stores, you're going to tend to see a lot of the same varieties over and over again. Whereas if you're starting from seeds, it opens up a whole host of other growing opportunities for you. And it's really important when we think about climate change and moving forward with preserving biodiversity that we're growing different varieties and not just the same things over and over again. So that's why we do it. Now we're going to talk about how we do it. So up on the screen, you can see there's a couple examples of upcycled growing containers. If you're starting indoors, you can upcycle and start your stuff inside before you move it to outside. Over on the screen here, I've got milk containers. old juice containers, we have yogurt containers, we have cans, you could do soda bottles. We've even got an orange peel up here, which would be very popular with some of our nitrogen-loving plants as well. Anytime you upcycle a container, one important thing to think about is drainage. So if we were buying a carton of milk from the store and it had drainage holes built into it, that would sort of defeat the purpose of purchasing milk at the store, right? But if we're using it for growing, we just need to pop a couple of holes in there before we put soil in our seeds. Okay, now we're going to talk about 5th grade science, which is one of my favorite things. So we're going to talk about the parts of a seed. When you're looking at a seed, the very hard exterior is called the seed coat, and that is meant to protect all of that very valuable information that's kept inside, including the embryo, which is our little baby plant, and all of its endosperm, which is the food that each seed stores for the embryo before its leaves are ready to do photosynthesis. And this is important because we can further jumpstart the growing process by softening up that seed coat, which we'll talk about in a sec. When we take our seed and we put it into the ground, there's a few things that are happening. It's being introduced to soil, so that's holding some heat around the seed. That soil is also holding like moisture and humidity and water and oxygen. But when that happens, this is sort of what's happening underneath the ground, is that all of that humidity and that heat is going to soften up that outer seed coat and allow for those first little baby roots to form. And over the next days to weeks, that root system is going to set up shop underground. And eventually, when it reaches like a critical mass and it can start drawing in water through its roots and nutrients, then it'll sprout. And it'll have its first set of leaves, which are called cotyledons. And those are not the leaves that are gonna do photosynthesis. We need to wait a little bit longer for that until we get the true leaves. And once we have true leaves, then we have the beginnings of like the plants that we're gonna eventually think about switching to outside. The other thing we need to talk about is how we can speed that process up a little bit too. So if we were to take our seeds and we were to soak them overnight, or we were to wet paper towels and put the seeds in the paper towels and then seal that up in like a Ziploc or Tupperware container, that is going to add heat and humidity and moisture needed to make it a little bit easier for that little baby embryo inside the seed to pop through. This is also a really great way to test. Like, so if you have seeds that are, maybe you found them in a drawer and you're not sure if they're still viable anymore and the date on the seed packet has expired, you can soak them in this paper towel, seal them up, and you can see if like you put 20 seeds in the paper towel and maybe only 2 of them germinated, then you're going to need to put a few extra seeds in each hole when it's time to plant, because you'll know that your germination rate has decreased based on the age of those seeds. But it's a good way to test if they're still good. So the 3 factors we already talked about were water, warmth, and oxygen. Oxygen is really important when we think about our growing medium. So when we think about the soil that we want to use, it should be nice and light and fine. It should be well aerated and loose, because that's going to ensure that there's oxygen available to our plant. We always recommend to start with seed starting mix or potting soil that you pick up fresh, because that way you will know that there's no insects, there's no disease, there's no weed seeds, there's no contamination, which is unfortunately kind of an issue throughout New York City, and that it's going to perform the way that you need it to and the way that your plant needs it to. Can you use outdoor soil? That's always a really popular question. We don't recommend it because it usually needs some level of remediation, and in New York City, there's always some level of contamination, so we very much recommend starting fresh. If that's something that you really feel passionately about, you can message us, and there is a way that you can use outdoor soil, but it's kind of complicated and a little bit more than most people want to do when they're just getting started. Okay, let's talk about overall factors. When we are starting seeds, we want to think about the timing. So this is maybe not something you need to worry about so much if you are not planning on transplanting your plant outside eventually. If you're just going to keep it inside, then you can worry about this a little bit less. But if you are planning to move it outside, then we need to think about how many days does it take to germinate, and then how many days does it take before we can ultimately harvest. And this will help us work backwards to think about when we should be starting our seeds indoors. Depth, we always get questions about how deep do you plant a seed. The rule of thumb is usually that it's twice the length of the seed. And you know, seeds are not very big, so we really don't need to go that deep into the ground when we're planting. But again, your seed packet will tell you as well. We want to think about how many seeds. Putting one seed in each little hole that you make in the ground is usually not enough because we need to think about germination rates. So I like to think of it as like a pinch, like you pinch your seeds and you put them in each one. 3 to 5 seeds for those of you who really like numbers and want to count. Water, we have to water the ground before we plant always. And water is really important, but water can also be very detrimental to our plants. So when we're thinking about what the soil needs to feel like, we want to think of like a wrung out sponge. It should be as wet as a wrung out sponge. And I will also say that we should label. We should put the date that we planted and the plant variety, especially if you're doing more than one thing in the same container, because it is really hard to tell when they first start coming up before they have their true leaves, what is what. And if you label, then you'll know, okay, so this, my plant says that it should take about 10 to 14 days to germinate. It's been 21 and nothing's happening. Something's wrong, time to start over. This chart is incredibly helpful. We are gonna send this to you after the presentation. This is our spring planting guide, so you'll have this and more. Plus we'll send you our fall one as well. Now I highlighted basil here for us, so let's take a look at basil. Next to it, you see it says DS, which stands for direct seed. So that means we're putting it straight into ground, versus T, which is transplant. We'll get to that. So if it takes basil 4 to 10 days to germinate, and we know we can put it outside around like April 15th, and then we know that it's going to take about 70 days for this basil plant to mature, that means that we're harvesting basil around July 4th. So right in time for 4th of July pesto parties. But if we are transplanting our basil, which is the next line, and we were to start it inside, say on March 6th, it takes about 4 to 10 days to germinate. We transplant it, same, April 17th, April 15th. Those are usually good windows for like the last frost in New York City. We've just taken 10 days off of the maturity time, and we are harvesting then June 16th. So starting indoors can take off a couple of weeks, which means that I can have pesto in the middle of June, which is great because I can eat pesto all day, every day. Okay, once your plant has sprouted, so when you've got your leaves that have come out of the soil, then it needs light. So nice sunny windows are good. Grow lights can also work if you don't have a nice sunny window. At this point, we're going to reduce the water a little bit because we don't want to overwhelm our new baby roots as they're starting to grow. And as far as the temperature, this is the easy part. They are comfortable as we are comfortable. So room temperature that's nice for us is also nice for our plants. A little colder at night in case they want to snuggle in their blankets like we do. Let's look at sprouts, because when your plants sprout, you'll know kind of pretty fast if how they're doing. The one on the left is very healthy. Like it's got a nice thick stem wall. It's got a couple of sets of leaves. There's no browning or any like yellowing on the leaves. So this is a very, very happy seedling. On the left is a little bit of a different story. So these are really, the stems are really long and stringy. The leaves are looking a little yellow over there. And you'll notice that they are reaching. So this is what we call etiolated, which means that it's not getting enough light, and plants will always reach in the direction of the light source. So if you notice like these, that they're tipping to the right, then we need to move that plant over just a few inches or a few feet so that they get more of that direct light, and that'll make those plants a lot happier. Let's say that you have planted your seedlings, they're coming up, and you have more than one per cell. So you put 5 seeds in the ground and you got 5 plants. That's great. However, we can't keep them all. Because if you, for example, in this container, this is like a 1-by-1 cell. If you had 5 plants in there, they won't all make it. Their roots are going to crowd each other out. There's just not enough nutrient in there for them. So we get our little haircut scissors. And if you have been cutting your hair at home, like I have for the past few months, You're very practiced in this. We just take the scissor and we cut off the extra plants. Try to leave the plants behind that have a couple of sets of true leaves. That means they're more likely to survive. And if anything happens to one set of their leaves, they have backup there. So cut the ones that aren't looking like as robust and then leave the rest. We always want to cut from above so that we don't touch the roots. All right, now this is maybe the most important part of the slide. If you are only going to grow indoors, you don't have to worry about this. But if you are going to move your plants outside, or if you have ever tried to start things indoors and then move them outside and they died, this is probably where you went wrong. So we can't take a plant that's in absolutely perfect conditions and move it outside right away. It's not going to like it. It's going to go into shock and it's not going to make it. We have to very gradually work towards moving those plants outside. So one of the ways that you can prepare them is to pet your plants. So like literally just ruffle them like you would through somebody's hair. That's going to prepare them to meet wind when they go outside. You could use a fan for this, but if you do use a fan, that also might dry your soil out. So you just need to check that moisture level in your soil if you want to use it, but that'll work the same way too. And then we need to take them outside for little walks, just like when we go outside and we take a walk every day. Take your plants with you. Try to maybe like an hour, 2 hours, work them up to it. On a shady day is better than a sunny day because we don't want to shock them with too much direct light right away. And now is a good time to start reducing the water just a little bit, because when they move outside, they're not going to get these absolutely perfect conditions that you've made for them inside. So we need to start easing them off. And after you've done this for a week or two, they're looking great. We can think about moving them outside more permanently. So we want to wait until a nice cloudy day after around like that mid-April final frost that we usually get in New York. We want to make sure that our plants have at least 3 sets of leaves on each seedling because they need their backup friend leaves just in case. We're going to moisten the ground first. And we always get questions about how deep to plant seedlings. So if your plant, when you take it out of the pot, is about 1 or 2 inches deep, then that's how deep you bury your plant outside. When we're taking plants out of the pot, there's a lot of potential for damaging their roots. So we never want to pull the plant by the stem out of its pot. We want to kind of hold the plant between our fingers, flip the pot, and then squeeze the outside of the pot to loosen it up. And then it'll just slide right out and it'll be ready to go with no damage to the roots. When you do put things outside, I just transplanted some arugula. It looked horrible for the first 4 days. I really did, was it going to make it? I don't know. Transplant shock. That means that, it's new. These are all new conditions. It's getting used to it. By about day 5, it was fine. All right, here's one thing. If you take your plant out of its growing container and it looks like the one on the left, you're good. There's a nice root structure in there. They're open, they've got room. If you think about the roots as straws, all of these straws are untangled, so they'll all be able to get a good sip out of the soil. Now, if you look on the right, this is called root bound. And if we think about those roots like straws, these straws are tangled. So very gently, I keep using hair today, I'm sorry, I guess it's on my mind. You would take those roots and just kind of rake your fingers through very gently. We don't want to break those roots, we just want to loosen them up so that they can drink when they get into the ground. There are times where you might want to transplant, and there's other times where you might want to direct sow, which is where you put your seeds straight into the ground. We want to transplant so we can jumpstart the season so that we can establish healthy, mature plants in the ones that need a little more time set up shop. So examples of ones that need more time to set up are here. We want to direct sow, which is plant directly into the ground when we have a really fast start to finish time, like a radish, which only takes 28 days. So what's the point moving it over halfway through? It's almost done time. And then anything with a very delicate root system is better to just put in place once. So like spinach, for example, has a very delicate root system. Just put it straight in the ground. Let it do its thing. No need to transplant. If you are growing indoors only and you're not putting outside, these are some really great things to have indoors. So herbs by windowsill are going to do awesome. Microgreens are fantastic windowsill growers, super easy. We have a whole guide that we're going to send you after on how to do microgreens. You can do lettuce, you can do spinach, you can do arugula. If you have a nice deep pot, like say yay deep, I don't know, it's very hard to fit me in that screen. Radishes, carrots, ginger, and garlic. We grow ginger in our office at Grow NYC, and it is very exciting when it's time to harvest it because it smells amazing and everybody comes running from their desks. So good way to make friends. And then if you don't want to do edibles, we have some really good air quality plants here. Snake plants are fantastic, spider plants, pothos, peace lilies. But even if you're doing indoor plants, there may still come a time when they need a bigger pot and need to be transplanted. You'll know that it's time for that if you're watering every day because the soil just can't hold enough water for them. They're going to drink it right up. If your roots are growing through the drainage holes, good sign that it's time to move them over. That pot is not big enough. If your plant's growth has been pretty steady and fast and then all of a sudden it slows down, that's a good sign that it needs a little more room. And if your roots are pushing the plant out of the planter, I had a snake plant once and it really looked like it was going to jump out of its pot. And that's how I knew that it was time to move it over. When we do transplant our indoor plants, I know it's really tempting to just get the next, like the biggest pot you can find and be like, I'll be done, right? But like actually we only want to go for a pot that's maybe like 1 to 2 inches bigger than what it's currently in. Otherwise you will have to like add more water than you would want to in order for it to reach those roots. And that leads to things like root rot. So we don't want to do that. So nice soil, good to do it at the beginning of spring when plants naturally are going into a growth cycle. We will share this with you after. And now it is time for Q&A. So.
Awesome, great. We have a lot of really good questions in here. Before I get to seed starting questions, there were a couple about finding the recording and the Q&A from yesterday's session. So I want to say that before people, well, everyone is still here. So if you go into the email, the follow-up email, it should lead you to it's like a blog post on grownycdistancelearning.org. And so that post is where you'll find the video and the link to see the Q&A from yesterday. We're going to send another one today, but it's up on our grownycdistancelearning.org site, grownycdistancelearning.org. Okay, now on to seed starting questions. Is it too late to start seeds for this season in New York City? And if it's not too late, what are your recommendations for some seeds to get started now?
It's definitely not too late. You can do this anytime. When we send you that spring planting calendar, that'll give you some indications there as well in case there's something particular that you would like to do. One of my favorite things to grow are Haruki turnips. They are really, have you guys grown them too? They are so fun. They're like kind of spicy and they look like a radish, but they kind of taste like radishes actually. And those are really cool to grow. Greens are always great. Microgreens you can do anytime. Microgreens are amazing because they're so easy to grow compared to like paying $7 to $10 for them in the supermarket.
And someone actually asked, can you explain what microgreens are?
Oh, so microgreens, let's say you plant greens, like it's a good example, like a sunflower shoot, say, right? So you would plant your seeds, and then instead of letting that plant get to its full size, you're actually going to harvest it when it's only about like an inch or so tall. And then you can use them for salads. You can just eat them plain. Some people like to put them in smoothies. So that's a microgreen. That's a shoot. It's a little baby green. We're just not going to let it grow into its full size plant. We're going to eat it when it's still a baby.
All right, we have which seeds can you get out of foods without buying the seeds? So stuff you're getting from maybe a farmer's market or a grocery store, things like lemon, orange, avocado. What else can you get from foods? What kind of seeds?
There's quite a lot that you can get. One thing garlic is a really great one. Ginger is another thing that you can start just with itself. One thing that I will say though is that if you are going to do that, it's really important to go organic versus like a conventionally grown. A lot of the conventionally grown seeds that you can take out of a plant are not going to grow. So definitely if you are planning to do that, purchase organic or purchase from a farmer's market, and that'll ensure that you'll be able to grow. Laura, you've got a lemon growing on your
Yeah,
window so that
I
you
did a
could,
lemon. I
yeah,
feel like I just find anything that has seeds, sometimes I'll just give it a try as an
yeah,
experiment.
exactly.
We have on our website about how to like harvest your pepper seeds
Peppers, yeah.
or things like that. All right, next question. My Tuscan kale is flowering and has seeds right now. How do I keep them for next year? So that's like a seed saving question.
Laura, you want to take it?
With that one, I'd have to double check, I think, because it does depend on the plant. Sometimes you have to harvest the seeds and dry them out for a bit and then keep them until next year. Sometimes the seeds are like ready to go in the ground the next day. I don't know if Chantel, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think once you see that it's flowered, if you touch the flower and it already feels dry, it's really the greatest time to harvest the seeds. Another way would be really you would just cut off all the flowers and put it in like a Ziploc bag or a brown paper bag and then let them dry out naturally. But then you would kind of have to like flake it off of the flower buds and then kind of separate it from the flower buds and the seeds, and that's a little bit more work. So it depends what stage your kale is at, and if you're saying that it's flowered, it's probably pretty big at this point. So you might just be like, I'm gonna just cut them all off and seed save that way. And just remember to just go back to them later and keep them in a really cool and dry place.
Cool. We are gonna, I think, go another 5 minutes because we have a lot more questions. So we're gonna keep taking questions. Another one is if you're seed starting in something like an egg carton or newspaper, can you plant that directly outside in the ground, or do you have to remove the paper?
You know, one of the things about egg cartons and newspaper is that it's going to start to naturally disintegrate after a couple of waterings anyway. And so you probably want to keep something under that just because, one slight accidental overwater and it's falling apart. But you can, I mean, I've definitely, from newspapers, I've planted straight into the ground from newspaper cups. There's also like seed starting cups that are like specifically meant to go straight into the ground when you're ready. So I think it's fine as long as it's in that disintegration stage. I probably wouldn't do it if it was super solid still, because it's just going to make it that much harder for your root system to push out once you've transplanted it. So I would just make sure that it's like maybe when you touch it, it's very crumbly even to when you kind of need to lift it very carefully to get it into the next pot because it's falling apart, that's probably when it's fine to go straight into the into the next space.
Someone asked, what is a nutrient mix soil, or is there a specific type of soil to help my seedlings?
I mean, any organic potting soil mix is going to be fine. There's also like organic seed starting mixes that have like a little extra nutrient in it for starting seeds. Either one of those is fine. People always ask us if we have like a recommendation for a brand, or we don't. We don't. Those will do you fine.
All right. If you use a grow light, how close does the light need to be?
So this is always the age-old question. And the short answer is that that's going to change depending on what stage of growth that you're in. In the beginning, before your seeds have sprouted, it's really just for the warmth, right? Because nobody's photosynthesizing yet. And then when it sprouts, you never want it to be too close to your plants. You'll know if we talked about it being too far because they're going to look kind of leggy. You'll know if it's too close if they kind of look burnt. Like if those leaves are curling up or they're browning or they're yellowing, you need to back that grow light off a little bit. So you're kind of adjusting as you go.
All right. Can you, oh wait, where is this? Oh, sorry, I lost it. Oh, do we still have time to plant things, or should we buy seedlings, like from a farmer's market?
Depends what you want to grow. I mean, if you are growing things that are quick, like we call them quick victories, so things that are going to sprout and reach maturity in like a month, you're good. If we're right in the middle of something's growing season right now, maybe it's better to start with a starter plant. It depends what you're growing and where you're trying to grow it to. What do you think? You guys want to add to that also?
Well, I know I didn't have 100% success with all of my seed starts this year, so I'm doing a mix. There's some that I've started, like my cilantro is coming up really fast and easy, but I had it like my basil is struggling a little bit, so I might visit a farmer's market at some point and get a little seed start.
Yeah, I would say for your bigger plants like the tomatoes, like a lot of your tropical stuff, you definitely don't want to try to start those indoors unless you have a large scale farm that we don't know about. But if you're just trying to grow something in the house or on the roof or something like that, those ones, the eggplant, the tomatoes, stuff like that, you're gonna want to buy outright.
Yeah.
If you want to, I guess, be adventurous, you could kind of play around with the leafy greens, but sometimes it might make sense to just buy starts for those two and maybe seed start for some of the herbs and other stuff like that.
One really good, if you are going to buy seedlings, one really good tip that I learned at one point is that you always want to look for the ones that are being displayed outside, because it means that they have been hardened off versus the ones that you're going to scoop up from like inside the greenhouse or the nursery or wherever, because maybe those ones haven't made that transition to outside yet. So if you want a good hardier plant that's more likely to make it, go for the ones that are displaying outside.
All right, so someone here, what if you planted seeds without watering the soil first? Are they still going to germinate? Can I still go back and water them now?
Water them now. Yeah, I mean, it's like a good rule of thumb to water first, but I wouldn't say you have to abandon the whole product just because you didn't water it from the beginning. So I would water them now. I mean, depending on how long they've been in the ground, maybe if it's like one day, you might want to like maybe scoop your seed out and like moisten and redo. But otherwise, I would say just water it.
Yeah, I think if the water hasn't touched it, then that means the seed is still sleeping, basically.
Yeah.
So it just hasn't woken up yet. So you still have time to water it. What are the best places to plant seeds indoors versus outdoors? So I guess what are like the conditions that we're looking for maybe?
Yeah, so if I'm doing it indoors, I'm looking for sunny windows because I want them to have a nice warm spot. We're into summer now, so I probably wouldn't want to put them too close to an air conditioner just because that's gonna give it like quite a lot of draft, and also the air coming out of the air conditioning vent, it's potentially going to dry out the soil a little bit more. If I was doing this in the winter and I was doing it, I would probably want to make sure that my plants weren't on a radiator, which I know is kind of tough in New York City because radiators and windows usually go hand in hand, but radiators are going to dry out your soil and make it just a lot harder to sort of like regulate what's going on inside that plant pot. And if it was winter or cold weather season, I would also want to make sure that it wasn't next to a very drafty window because that's also going to potentially impact. So if you do have a drafty window, you may just want to like lay a little towel down. If you're planting outside, I mean, the sky's the limit with outside. I think a lot of it just depends on how much light you get in that area and making sure that you're picking out plants that are going to do well with the amount of light that you have. But yeah, I mean.
Cool. I'm going to do just one more question now, but we will get to all the rest of them in our follow-up on grownyc.distancelearning.org. And you will get an email, so you don't even have to remember that. You could just click the link. But the last question that we're going to go over is, how long can I keep my seeds? A year, 2 years, if I have a 10-year-old packet of seeds.
So, I mean, you can keep them forever, but the germination rate is going to go down. If you have them in like a climate controlled space, it's not that they're going to necessarily go bad. It's that your germination rates are going to decrease. So you can test that like using the wet paper towel and the Ziploc bag or the wet paper towel inside like a sealed container. And you just may need to put more seeds into the ground. So like, let's say you took 50 seeds and you put them in your paper towel to test them and only 2 germinated. Toss them, right? Like at that point, you know, it's not going to be a great success rate, but if you put 50 and half of them did, then that's pretty good. So you may just want to, if you were going to do 3 to 5 seeds, you may just want to do more than that in each of your little planting spaces so that you increase your likelihood that they're still good. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Do you want to bring us to the very last slide, Kristen?
I do.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Be on the lookout for the follow-up email sometime tonight that will have the post with this session of follow-up materials and the Q&A. Tomorrow's workshop is on home composting. Again, starts at 2 p.m. So we hope to see you there. Please remember to sign up via the Eventbrite so you get the reminder email and Zoom link. And if you enjoyed this workshop and want to support our work, please consider making a donation to Grow NYC. Any amount is greatly appreciated. Special thanks to Kristen for presenting today, to all of you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and hopefully the rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.